Pilgrim's Progress, Part 2, the first stage. By this time, Christiana had gotten underway on her journey along with her children, and Mercy went along with them also. "And Mercy," Christiana said, "I take this as an unexpected favor, that you should set forth like this to accompany me a little in the way." Young Mercy smiled, for she was but a young maid. "If I thought it would lead to anything of good consequence to go along with you, I would never go near the town again." "Well, Mercy," Christiana said, "join with me, for I know well what awaits at the end of our pilgrimage. My husband is in a place where he would not be, even if he had all the gold in the Spanish mines. And you won't be rejected either, for you go upon my invitation. The king who has sent for me and my children delights in Mercy. Besides, if you are willing, I will hire you, and you shall come with me as my servant. Yet we will all have things in common between you and me. Just come along with me." Lines of thought marked Mercy's young brow. "But how shall I be certain that I would also be received with hospitality? If I had such a hope as this, but from one with authority, I wouldn't hesitate at all. I would go being helped by him who can help, even though the way is ever so wearisome." "Well, my dear loving Mercy," Christiana said, "I'll tell you what you should do. Go with me to the Wicket Gate, and there I will further ask for you. If you do not receive encouragement to continue with me on pilgrimage, I will be content for you to return to your home. I will also pay you for the kindness which you have shown to me and my children, by coming with us and supporting us in the way you have." Mercy clasped her hands beneath her chin and said, "Then I shall go to the Wicket Gate, and will accept what comes next. May the Lord grant that my portion fall there, and that the King of Heaven shall have his affections upon me." Christiana's face beamed with gladness, not only because she had a traveling companion, but also because she had succeeded in making this poor maid fall in love with her own salvation. So they went on together, and Mercy began to weep. Christiana looked at her friend and asked, "Why are you weeping like this, my sister?" "I can't help it," Mercy said. "I am compelled to cry and weep when I consider what a state and condition my poor relatives and friends are in. You know, the ones who remain behind in our sinful town. What makes my sorrow and regret all the more heavy is that they have no instructor or anyone to tell them what is to come." "Compassion becomes pilgrims," Christiana said, "and you weep for your family and friends as my good Christian did for me when he left me. He grieved and wept because I would not listen to him or pay attention. I treated him as if what he had to say was of no interest, but his Lord of ours gathered up his tears and put them into his bottle. And now you and I, plus my sweet children, are reaping the fruit and benefit of them. I hope, Mercy, that these tears of yours will not be lost, for the truth has said that those who sow in tears shall reap with joyful shouting. He who goes to and fro weeping, carrying his bag of seed, shall indeed come again with a shout of joy, bringing his sheaves with him." Then Mercy said, "Let the most blessed be my guide, if it be his will, unto his gate, into his fold, and up to his holy hill. And let him never allow me to turn aside or veer from his free grace and holy ways, whatever I suffer. And let him gather those of mine whom I have left behind. Lord, please make them be thine, with all their heart and mind." Now my old friend continued with the tale of Christiana's pilgrimage, and said that when she came to the Slough of Despond, she slowed and came to a stop. For she said, "This is the place in which my dear husband was almost smothered with mud." Nevertheless, she also recognized the command of the king to make this place good for pilgrims, and yet it was worse than before. So I asked if that was true. "Yes," said the old gentleman, "too true. For many pretend to be the king's workers, and say that they are for restoring the king's highways, but they bring dirt and dung instead of stones, and as a result cause more damage than repair. Therefore it was here at the Slough of Despond where Christiana and her boys came to a stop. But Mercy said, "Come, let us risk going forward, but let us be cautious." Then they looked carefully where they stepped, and shifted their path, and reeled from one side to the other with doubt. The experience left Christiana feeling like she had been mired in the slough more than once or twice, but eventually they did cross over. They had no sooner reached the other side when they thought they heard someone say, "Blessed is she who believed that there would be a fulfillment of what had been spoken to her by the Lord." Hearing these words, they continued on their way, and Mercy said to Christiana, "If I had as good a cause to hope for a loving reception at the Wicket Gate as you, I don't think any Slough of Despond would be able to discourage me." "Well," said Christiana, "you know your affliction, and I know mine." She placed her hand on Mercy's shoulder. "We shall all have enough misfortune before we reach our journey's end, my good friend. For can you imagine people like us who plan to reach such excellent glories as we do, and who are subject to envy because of the happiness we have without enemies who hate us? They will assault us with fears and snares and with troubles and afflictions. And now Mr. Sagacity left me to dream out my dream by myself. Therefore it seemed to me that I saw Christiana, Mercy, and the boys all go up to the gate. When they came to it, they entered into a short debate about how they should conduct their affairs when calling at the gate. For instance, they discussed what should be said to the one who opened the gate and who should do the talking. So they concluded, since Christiana was the eldest, that she should be the one to knock for entrance, and that she should also speak for the rest of them to the man who opened the gate. So Christiana began to knock, and just like her poor husband, she knocked and knocked again. But instead of a person answering the knock, they all thought they heard the sound of a dog barking in their direction. It wasn't just any bark, but the deep sound of an enormous dog. This filled the women and children with dread. They dared not knock any more for fear the mastiff would stir at the noise and rapidly overtake them. Due to this turn of events, they were greatly confused and unsure of what they should do next. They dared not knock for fear of the dog. They dared not go back for fear the keeper of that gate should see them as they left and then be offended with them. Finally, they thought about knocking again, but this time they knocked more passionately than they did the first time. The keeper of the gate answered, "Who is there?" And at the sound of the gatekeeper's voice, the dog ran off to bark elsewhere, and the gatekeeper opened the gate to them. Christiana bowed low and said, "Lord, please don't be offended with your handmaidens, because we have knocked at his princely gate." Then the keeper said, "From what place have you come, and what is it that you want?" Christiana answered, "We have come from the same place from which Christian came, and for the same business. To be clear, we are asking that if it pleases you, that we be graciously admitted by this gate into the way that leads to the celestial city. And I answer, my lord, in regarding the second question, that I am Christiana, once the wife of Christian, who now has arrived above." With that, the keeper of the gate gaped in wonder, saying, "What? Did the one who abhorred that life just a short time ago now become a pilgrim?" She bowed her head and said, "Yes, and so are these my sweet children also." He reached out and took her by the hand and led her in, and also said, "Permit the little children to come unto me." And with that, he shut up the gate. Then he called to a trumpeter who was situated above, over the gate, to receive Christiana with shouting and the sound of a joyful trumpet. So he obeyed and sounded the trumpet, which filled the air with pleasant music. Now all this time poor Mercy stood outside the gate, trembling and crying, for she feared she had been rejected. But when Christiana had gained admittance for herself and her boys, she began to make intercession for mercy. Christiana said, "My lord, I have a companion who still stands outside the gate, who has come here for the same reason as myself. She is feeling quite discouraged because she thinks she has come here without an invitation, while I was sent for by my husband's king." Mercy began to be very impatient, and each minute seemed as long as an hour to her. Therefore she prevented Christiana from a fuller interceding for her by knocking at the gate herself, and she knocked so loud that she made Christiana jump. Then the keeper of the gate asked, "Who is there?" And Christiana said, "It is my friend." So he opened the gate and looked out, but Mercy had fallen down unconscious outside the gate because she had fainted for fear that the gate would not be opened to her. The keeper reached down and took her by the hand. He said, "Young woman, I command you to get up." Mercy opened her eyes and said, "Oh, sir, I am faint. There is hardly a trace of life left in me." But the keeper answered her that one once said, "While I was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple." The keeper told her, "Fear not, but stand upon your feet, and tell me why you have come here." Mercy stood on shaking legs and said, "I have come for that which I was never invited, like my friend Christiana was. Hers was from the king, and my invite was but from her. Therefore I fear I have ventured here without permission." "Did she desire you to come with her to this place?" the keeper asked. Mercy gave an earnest nod. "Yes, and as my lord sees, I have come. And if there is any grace and forgiveness of sins to spare, I request that your poor handmaid may be a partaker of it." The keeper took Mercy again by the hand and led her gently inside the wicket gate. He said, "I pray for all who believe on me." Then he said to others who stood nearby, "Fetch something and give it to Mercy to smell, to help stop her from fainting." So they fetched a bundle of myrrh, and she inhaled deeply of its fragrance, and a short while later was revived. And so Christiana and her boys and Mercy were all received by the Lord at the head of the way, and they were spoken kindly to by him. They also said to him, "We are sorry for our sins, and beg of our Lord his pardon and further information regarding what we must do." He said, "I grant pardon by word and deed, by word in the promise of forgiveness, by deed in the way I obtained it. Take the first from my lips with a kiss, and the other as it shall be revealed." Now I saw in my dream that he spoke many good words to them, by which they were greatly gladdened. He also brought them up to the top of the gate, and showed them at what time they were saved, and also told them that this sight would comfort them again as they went along in the way. So he left them a while in a summer parlor below, where they refreshed themselves and discussed what had happened. Christiana began and said, "Oh, how glad am I that we have gotten in here." Mercy agreed, but said, "You may very well be glad, but I have even more cause to leap for joy." Christiana considered the time she spent knocking at the gate and said, "I thought at one time as I stood knocking at the gate and no one answered, that all our labor had been for nothing, especially when that ugly mongrel made such a loud, deep barking against us." Mercy said, "My worst fear came after I saw you were taken into his favor. When you disappeared through the gate, I thought I had been left behind. At the time I thought that what is written had been fulfilled. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one will be left. I made quite a commotion, but refrained from crying out, 'Ruined! Destroyed!' I was afraid to knock at the gate again, but when I looked up and saw what was written over the gate, I took courage. I also decided I must either knock again or die. So I knocked, but I can't begin to tell how my spirit struggled between life and death." Christiana asked, Couldn't you tell how loudly you knocked? I can tell that your knocks were so earnest that they startled me. I thought that I had never heard such knocking in all my life. In fact, I thought perhaps you would enter the gate by force or take the kingdom by storm. Regrettably, for someone in my situation, what else could I do? Mercy asked. You saw that the door shut after you entered, and I stood on the other side along with that cruel dog. No one could be more faint-hearted than me, but who in my situation would not have knocked with all their might? But please tell me, what did my Lord say about my rudeness? Was he angry with me? A grin tugged at the corner of Christiana's mouth. When he heard your unwieldy noise, he smiled a most wonderful smile. I believe what you did pleased him, for he showed no sign to the contrary. But I wonder in my heart why he keeps such a dog. I have to say that if I had known that before we came to the gate, I'm not sure I would have had courage enough to have attempted any of this. But now we are in. She grabbed Mercy's shoulders. We are in, and deep down, I've never been happier. Mercy's head bobbed in agreement. Please, next time he comes down, be sure to ask him why he keeps such a filthy mongrel in his yard. She paused for a moment and said, I hope he will not take it wrong. Yes, do ask him, the children said in unison, and persuade him to hang the mongrel, for we are afraid he will bite us in the future. So finally he came down to them again. When Mercy saw him, she fell to the ground on her face before him and worshipped. She said, Let my Lord accept the sacrifice of praise, which I now offer to him with my lips. So he said to her, Peace be to you. Stand up. But she continued to lay face down and said, Righteous are you, O Lord, that I would plead my case with you. Indeed, I would discuss matters of justice with you. She peeked up at him and asked, Why do you keep such a cruel dog in your yard? At the sight of it, women and children such as us are ready to flee from your gate in fear. He said, That dog has another owner who lives in the castle which you see there in the distance. He just keeps him close to another man's property, and my pilgrims hear his barking, but can still come up to the walls of this place. While that is neither bad nor good, he has frightened many an honest pilgrim by the deep booming of his barking. The fact is that the owner of the dog doesn't keep him out of any goodwill to me or mine, but with the sole intent to keep pilgrims from coming to me. It is his hope that pilgrims may be too afraid to come and knock at this gate when they hear the ferocious bark of his dog. Sometimes the dog has even broken out and harassed some whom I loved, but for now I accept it patiently. I will also give my pilgrims timely help, so that they are not transferred to his power to do with as his doggish nature would prompt him to do. But if you had been my purchased one before you met the dog, I trust you would not have been afraid. The beggars who go from door to door are willing to run the hazard of the bawling, barking, and biting of a dog rather than lose possible donations. So, shall a dog in another man's yard, a dog whose barking I turn to the prophet of pilgrims, keep any from coming to me? I deliver them from the lions, and my precious ones from the power of the dog. Mercy sat up and said, I confess my ignorance. I spoke about things which I did not understand. I acknowledge that you do all things well. Then Christiana began to talk of their journey and to ask for directions, for she fed them. So he fed them and washed their feet and set them in the way of his steps, in the same way he had done for her husband at the start of his pilgrimage. The end of stage 1. Next week, the second stage. Thanks for listening.